Okay, so everyone's wondering what a second Trump term means for Bitcoin. Smart move tuning into this deep dive because honestly, everyone's got a take right now, but not all takes are created equal, as you know. And we've been doing a ton of research, and let me tell you, some of these analyst predictions are pretty wild.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Even before the election, Bitcoin was on a roller coaster ride. Remember, it was hovering around 68,000, down from that recent peak above 73,000. The whole crypto world was holding its breath, waiting to see which way the election would swing the market.
Totally. And, those pre-election predictions were all over the map. I mean, Bernstein analyst Gautam Chugani, for example, suggested we could see Bitcoin plummet to like 50,000 if Harris had won. Her stance on crypto regulation had people pretty spooked.
Right. The perception was that a Harris administration would meant like a much tighter regulatory leash on the crypto market. Yeah. And that could have stifled innovation and investment.
Okay.
But on the flip side, Chugani predicted Bitcoin could surge to 80,000 or even 90,000 if Trump won.
Which is exactly why everyone is buzzing right now. Trump paints himself as the pro-crypto candidate. And that image carries a lot of weight, especially for those looking to ride this wave of mainstream adoption. But the big question is it all just hype?
Well, let's delve into that. It's interesting to trace Trump's evolution on crypto. He went from expressing skepticism about cryptocurrencies back in the day to actively courting the crypto crowd during this campaign. Even remember when he paid for burgers and beers with Bitcoin? At that pub in New York City, PubKey.
Oh, yeah. The photos were everywhere. And then there were those endorsements from crypto giants like Mark Andreessen and the Winklevoss twins.
Exactly. Talk about a power move, right? These actions, combined with his rhetoric, really cemented this image of Trump as like a crypto champion. And for investors, that image translates to a potential gold mine. If Trump follows through with this crypto-friendly administration, we could see a regulatory landscape that's much more conducive to growth than what we might have seen under a Harris administration.
So less red tape, more innovation, and potentially a lot more green for those who bet on Bitcoin. Some analysts are even predicting it could hit 200,000 by the end of 2025. Now, that's a number to get excited about.
It is. But before you start planning your early retirement, let's take a step back and consider what a crypto-friendly environment actually entails. I think one of the key developments to watch is the potential approval of spot Bitcoin ETFs.
Okay, pause right there. I know you've got a head start on all this stuff, but for those of us just catching up, could you break down what a spot Bitcoin ETF is and why it matters so much?
Of course. In the simplest terms, a spot Bitcoin ETF would allow investors to buy and sell shares of Bitcoin on traditional stock exchanges, just like they trade stocks or bonds. This is a big deal because it makes it much easier for institutional investors, like hedge funds and pension funds, to get involved in the crypto market.
So it's like opening the floodgates for a whole new wave of investment into Bitcoin.
Exactly. And that influx of institutional money could be a major catalyst for price appreciation. It also lends legitimacy to Bitcoin, makes it less of a fringe asset and more of a mainstream investment vehicle.
And that ties into what you were saying about a crypto-friendly environment, with Trump's win and the potential for these spot Bitcoin ETF approvals. We could be seeing the stars aligning for a Bitcoin boom.
That's one way to look at it. However, let's not forget that Bitcoin is notoriously volatile. We've seen some massive price swings in the past, and those swings aren't going away anytime soon.
Right. Remember those crazy days when it was like watching a rocket launch and then like a sudden free fall all within a 24-hour period? My heart couldn't take it.
Exactly. And with all the excitement around Trump's win, it's easy to get caught up in the hype and lose sight of the risks.
So even with a pro-crypto president at the helm, we need to be prepared for a bumpy ride.
Absolutely. While the domestic environment in the U.S. might be looking rosy for Bitcoin, the global landscape is a different story. We're seeing countries around the world taking very different approaches to crypto regulation, and that uncertainty adds another layer of complexity to the equation.
So even if the U.S. rolls out the red carpet for Bitcoin, other countries could be putting up roadblocks.
Precisely. And let's not forget about the broader macroeconomic factors at play. We've got the Fed raising interest rates, global economic pressures mounting, and these things can have a ripple effect on all markets, including crypto.
All right, so it sounds like we've got a mix of potential tailwinds and headwinds for Bitcoin. We've got Trump's pro-crypto stance and the possibility of spot Bitcoin ETFs fueling optimism. But we also have to consider the global regulatory landscape
Okay.
and those broader economic factors that can throw a wrench in the works. I'm already feeling like I need a spreadsheet to keep track of it all.
It is a lot to digest, but don't worry, we're going to unpack it all step by step.
Okay, good, because my head is already spinning. Maybe we should take a moment to let all this sink in. We've covered a lot of ground already. Then we can dive into some specific scenarios for how this could all play out for Bitcoin under a Trump presidency. What do you say?
Sounds like a plan. A little breathing room can help us make sense of the bigger picture.
All right, my brain is rebooting after all that info. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the price predictions and hype, but I'm curious about the bigger picture. What does a Trump win potentially mean for the future of Bitcoin? I mean, beyond just the charts?
That's a great question. And it's where things get really interesting. Let's move beyond, those simple labels like bullish and bearish and look at the potential impact on Bitcoin adoption. Your research mentioned a few articles highlighting this very point.
Yeah, those articles really caught my eye. Everyone's talking about Bitcoin hitting 100,000 or even 200,000. But what does that actually mean for how people use Bitcoin in the real world?
Precisely. If the regulatory environment becomes more favorable, as we've discussed,
Yeah.
it could encourage businesses to adopt Bitcoin. We could see more companies accepting Bitcoin as payment, more individuals using it for everyday transactions.
So it's not just about investors making a quick buck. It's about Bitcoin becoming, well, actual money that people use to buy groceries, pay rent, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And remember those articles you flagged about Bitcoin's potential to become like a mainstream currency? This is where those predictions start to take shape. Imagine a world where you can seamlessly use Bitcoin for everything, from online shopping to paying your bills.
That would be revolutionary. It's like Bitcoin breaking free from the shackles of speculation and entering the realm of everyday life.
And as adoption grows, demand naturally increases, which could lead to a more sustainable form of price appreciation. It's a virtuous cycle, driven by utility rather than pure speculation.
Makes a lot of sense. But even if adoption picks up, can Bitcoin really overcome its image problem? Let's be honest. A lot of people still associate it with, the dark web and illicit activities. Those articles you shared even mention the Silk Road marketplace as a cautionary tale.
That's a valid concern. Bitcoin's early association with illicit activities definitely tarnished its reputation. However, as more legitimate businesses embrace it, that perception could gradually shift.
So it's like Bitcoin going through a rebranding phase, shedding its shady past and embracing a more respectable image.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe a self-proclaimed pro-crypto president like Trump could play a role in shaping that new narrative. If he were to publicly endorse Bitcoin, highlight its potential benefits, and encourage its adoption, it could go a long way in normalizing it in the eyes of the public.
Now that's an intriguing thought. Imagine Trump tweeting about how he just paid his taxes in Bitcoin. Okay, maybe that's a bit far-fetched, but you get the idea.
I do. A prominent figure like Trump, openly using and endorsing Bitcoin, could be a powerful force in mainstreaming its adoption.
It's like when a celebrity endorses a product, and suddenly everyone wants it.
Right. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. While there are a lot of potential positives for Bitcoin under a Trump presidency, it's important to acknowledge the potential downsides as well.
Okay, let's talk about those potential downsides. What are some of the things that could rain on Bitcoin's parade?
Well, one concern is the potential for overreach. In his enthusiasm for crypto, Trump might push for policies that are too favorable to the industry, potentially even bending the rules to benefit certain players.
So it's like the old saying, too much of a good thing can be bad.
Precisely. If regulations become too lax, it could create opportunities for fraud and manipulation, which would ultimately harm Bitcoin's credibility and long-term prospects. Your research highlighted a few economists who expressed this very concern.
Yeah, some of those articles really emphasize the need for a balanced regulatory framework. It's like building a house, you need a strong foundation. Otherwise, the whole thing could collapse.
Exactly. We need regulations that encourage innovation, while also protecting investors and ensuring the integrity of the market.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, that Goldilocks zone of regulation, where it's not too strict, not too loose, but just right.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky. Because finding that balance is a complex process. There are so many competing interests and perspectives involved.
You mentioned some economists who expressed concern about potential overreach. Did your research highlight any other potential downsides?
Yes, a couple of the articles you shared discuss the potential for increased government surveillance. Remember, Bitcoin transactions are recorded on a public blockchain, which means they're transparent and traceable. This could raise concerns about privacy and government overreach, especially in light of Trump's past rhetoric on surveillance and national security.
That's a valid point. It's like a double-edged sword. On one hand, the transparency of the blockchain is touted as a feature that promotes accountability and trust. But on the other hand, it could be used for surveillance purposes.
Exactly. And that's a debate that's likely to intensify as Bitcoin becomes more mainstream. It's something to keep an eye on.
It definitely seems like we're entering uncharted territory here.
We are. And that's what makes it so fascinating. The future of Bitcoin under a Trump administration is a story that's still being written.
Okay, after all this talk about potential upsides and downsides, I have to ask, what are some specific scenarios that could play out for Bitcoin in the coming years?
Great question. Let's take a look at a few possibilities. All right, so let's explore some potential scenarios for Bitcoin's journey under a second Trump presidency. Remember, we're not fortune tellers here. But by considering different possibilities, we can gain a better understanding of the forces at play and prepare for various outcomes.
Okay, so no guarantees, just educated guesswork. I like it. Hit me with scenario number one.
Okay, so let's imagine Trump goes full steam ahead with his pro-crypto agenda. He pushes for deregulation, maybe even positions Bitcoin as like a strategic asset for the U.S. on the global stage.
Whoa, Bitcoin as a national treasure? That's a bold move. What kind of impact could that have?
Well, in that scenario, we could see a massive influx of investment, both from institutions and everyday folks like you. Imagine this wave of capital flooding into the market, fueled by the perception of a Bitcoin-friendly America. Those ambitious price targets we discussed earlier, 100,000, even 200,000, might start to look conservative.
It would be like the dot-com boom, but for crypto. A digital gold rush.
A great analogy.
Why?
And with increased investment, often comes a surge of innovation. We can see a whole new generation of crypto businesses, blockchain technologies, Bitcoin-related services popping up left and right.
So it's not just about the price going up, it's about a whole ecosystem blossoming around Bitcoin. That's what really gets me excited, the potential for this technology to change the world.
Absolutely. But now, let's flip the script. What if things don't go quite as smoothly? Let's call this scenario number two. What if there's significant pushback from regulators? Or maybe some global event throws a curveball.
Okay, yeah. Reality check time. What could derail this Bitcoin Express train?
Well, regulators might get cold feet. They could see this surge in adoption and worry about, financial stability or money laundering. A crackdown could dampen investor enthusiasm and put a brake on Bitcoin's price growth.
So instead of a boom, we get a bust. That would be heartbreaking.
It's a possibility and one we have to consider. And then there are those unpredictable global events. Imagine a major economic crisis, a geopolitical conflict, even a large-scale cyber attack on crypto exchanges. Any of these could trigger a sell-off and send Bitcoin tumbling.
Man, it sounds like Bitcoin's future under Trump. Is this high-stakes game with a lot of moving parts?
That's a great way to put it. Domestic policies, global regulations, technological advancements, even the whims of the market, they all factor into the equation.
So how do we make sense of all this? I mean, it's clear Bitcoin isn't going away, but it's tough to know which way things will swing.
You're right. And that's where your own research comes in. You've been digging into Bitcoin's potential. And that's the key. Understanding the technology, the risks, the potential rewards. That's how you navigate this complex landscape.
So it's less about predicting the future and more about being prepared for whatever comes our way.
Exactly. It's about understanding the forces that shape Bitcoin's destiny and using that knowledge to make informed decisions.
One thing that keeps coming up in my research is this idea of Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation. Do you think that narrative holds weight, especially with all the economic uncertainty swirling around?
It's a compelling narrative and one that resonates with a lot of investors, particularly during times of economic turmoil. Remember, Bitcoin has a fixed supply, which means it can't be inflated like traditional currencies.
Right. That limited supply is one of Bitcoin's key selling points, at least according to all those articles. It's like digital gold.
That's the idea. But whether Bitcoin truly acts as a hedge against inflation is still up for debate. It's a relatively young asset, and we haven't seen it tested in a truly inflationary environment.
So it's a potential hedge,
Yeah.
but not a guaranteed one.
Exactly. And that's where your own due diligence comes in. It's important to look beyond the headlines, delve into the data, Understand the arguments for and against Bitcoin as an inflation hedge, and make your own informed decision.
That's good advice for any investment, really. Don't just blindly follow the hype.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the most important point, your own personal goals and risk tolerance. You mentioned in your notes that you're considering adding some Bitcoin to your portfolio. That's great.
Yeah.
But it's crucial to approach it strategically.
Right. No YOLOing my life savings into Bitcoin.
Exactly. Consider your investment timeline, how much risk you're comfortable with, and how Bitcoin fits into your overall financial plan.
So it's about finding the right balance, just like with regulation.
Precisely. And remember, this is a journey, not a sprint. Bitcoin's story is still unfolding, and it's bound to be a wild ride. But if you approach it with knowledge, a healthy dose of skepticism, and a clear sense of your own goals, you'll be well equipped to navigate the twists and turns ahead.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on Bitcoin and its potential trajectory under a Trump presidency. Thanks for guiding me through this complex landscape.
It's been my pleasure.
Yep.
And remember, the future of Bitcoin is ultimately what we make it. By engaging in these conversations, challenging assumptions, and staying informed, we can shape the direction of this revolutionary technology.
Well said. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to navigating the exciting and often unpredictable world of Bitcoin. Keep learning, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep exploring.